When they come to this country, they have many problems. And not only do they have problems, but they set problems for the police which we have to meet.
Understands the word coon to mean a general term to cover poor people.
Years of being just victimised by these police. You could see how they treat you, your mum, you know, how they degrade your mother.
We've complained to the police about the police and nothing's been done. We've complained to magistrates about magistrates and nothing's been done. We've complained to judges about judges and nothing's been done. Now it's time to do something ourselves. That statement was made at the Mangrove demonstration and represents the essence of black people's experience in Britain. That since we've come here, we've suffered a long train of abuses by the police with the active knowledge and support of the British state. And those abuses have been able to be carried out under the pretext that, quote, black people are criminals, ponces and prostitutes. That is a myth that has been created about us. That is a statement that was made by one police officer who gave evidence in the Mangrove case.
Councillor Abraham, you're a Conservative councillor on the Conservative-controlled Avon Council. Do you understand the resentment of so many of the black community, especially young blacks in St. Paul's? Do you feel that they are justified in regarding themselves, as so many of them seem to do, as underprivileged, even as oppressed?
No, I don't, quite frankly.
Early January 1981, there was a house fire on the New Cross Road, and 13 young black people died that day. There had been lots of racist arson attacks in the area. Crime was never solved. What is absolutely indisputable is the indifference of the wider society to the loss of those young black lives.
Was the fact that justice was not sought at the time, and that racism made it impossible for people to investigate these crimes in the way they would have done if those who died had all been white.
They grabbed me, arresting you for suspicion of pickpocketing from persons owned. And hearing the screams of the older guy along the cell corridor, it was just...
The police aggression with the coloured youths around. And
police aggression?
Yes, police. They have pushed the boys too far. It's always been the police.
Battered down the door, beat up women, beat up men.
We were subsequently attacked by a police officer, several of us, many of us women, beaten up, imprisoned, put through the courts for 8 days, found not guilty.
And the inability of the police ever to admit they've made a mistake, ever, is appalling.
We were the occupying army, if you like, and thinking of the people of Brixton as the enemy, that there wasn't a good person amongst them, that they were all criminals, that blackness equated with criminality.
The power to stop and search suspects originally came from an old anti-vagrancy law, but was now being used overzealously by police to take young black men off the streets.
Can't arrest people every day, day in, day out. Are they really doing that? Are they really harassing people every day, day in, day out? Every day in, day out. Everybody will back me up. Everyone will back me about that.
What do you make of all this? Well, that's not good news, is it? I understand it.
Self-help has a limited meaning in an inner city community where 40% of the young kids may be without work, and if you're black, it may be 60%.
Deprived youngsters, unable to get fair opportunities of education or jobs because of the colours of their skin, took to the streets because they saw no other way of airing their grievances.
After the racist murder by fire of 13 young black people in January 1981, there could be no going back for the black communities. The chants, the rage of this march, 2 months later, were to be a final warning. 1981 was to be a year of blood and burning.
1981, rioting erupted in Brixton. The rioters were mainly black youths, many with a deep sense of grievance. Their target was a predominantly white police force. At the time of its publication, the Scarman Report marked a watershed by drawing attention to the depth and extent of racial discrimination. A new generation of black Britons who'd grown up here felt deeply alienated.
It's available only at £8.
His official terms of reference meant that his main focus had to be on police behaviour and relations with the black community. One of the prime causes of discontent was saturation policing and the use of the notorious sus law to stop anyone thought to be acting suspiciously. Much of the criticism was levelled at young police officers.
The majority they're youths, man. They're kids. They're not qualified police officers who can talk to people.
He also identified more general racist attitudes among the police.
Scarman did say that one had to look at the informal culture of the police and of other institutions, the canteen culture, for example, which is a powerful influence.
I'm not responsible for the finances or the economy of the country. All I can do is to analyse the social conditions, indicate areas where improvements could be made and ought to be made, and then leave it to the politicians in Parliament to decide whether the money is to be made available. I hope the money will be made available.
Well, of course, there are far too many immigrants in this country.
We do not have sufficient houses, jobs and schools for our own people, let alone immigrants.
And unless something's done about this quick, that prejudice is going to be sheer bloody hatred.
I know those problems. I grew up in the 30s with an unemployed father. He didn't riot. He got on his bike and looked for work, and he kept looking till he found it.
There has been some change, certainly in the rhetoric of senior police officers, and indeed in terms of institutional change, the development of liaison committees. But in terms of what actually happens on the street, the impact of policing, particularly on the black community, remains completely unaltered. The same abuses occur, the same tensions exist, and indeed there's a growing alienation and bitterness.
This meant that the solutions advocated by both Heseltine and Scarman were not taken up wholeheartedly.
I think it would be a mistake to think that money can solve the problems. Money can't buy either trust or racial harmony.
The Thatcher government did very little in actually putting in real jobs, improving the housing, improving the quality of life for black people.
Since then, the police have conducted an internal inquiry, but no officer was ever charged with the crime. In a surprise move, police have made an out-of-court offer of £75,000 in advance of a case for damages being brought here at the High Court next February. In a statement, they said the settlement didn't imply any admission of liability by the police and was made without prejudice in an attempt to bring this tragic case to a fair and reasonable conclusion.
The Tottenham riot tonight, police say a revolver as well as a shotgun was used. London's top policeman has given notice that his men are ready to use plastic bullets and tear gas. The warning came after last night's frenzy of violence on a housing estate in North London, during which a policeman was hacked to death.
The murder of PC Keith Blakelock, the only policeman to die during these inner-city disorders, remains unsolved. of the violence and the fact that there were other disturbances that year led some people to fear that rioting was becoming a feature of British life.
What happened after 1985 was a growing sense on the part of the police and the public that the end of the road had been reached, that unless there was some modus vivendi, some accommodation reached as between police and public in those areas, then the outcome would be one that was absolutely catastrophic.